Really, it's very simple to understand with a single picture here. So here's a graph. Here would be x and f of x. And basically, the function that I want to find the limit of might look something like this. So the function might go like that. And we'll call that function g of x, right? Now, ultimately, what I'm really trying to do is find the limit of this function as x approaches a. So basically, here is some point a. And you know from doing this enough, if you approach, then basically the limit is going to be here. All right? But as you know, the limits of some functions are a little bit harder to find than limits of other functions, right? And so this is a nice smooth function, so it might be pretty easy, but just depending on what you have, it might be a little difficult to find that particular limit. The squeezing theorem basically says that if you have a function that you care about finding the limit of, and if it's difficult to find that limit, if you can find a function on the top and the bottom that behave in a certain way, you can actually find the limit you care about. For instance, here's a function on the top. It might be coming in like this, and then it might just barely touch that point and then go off like that. So you see how the function comes down and touches barely at the point of interest that I care about. I'm going to call this function h, okay? And then we're going to have another function that we're going to come in from the bottom. And so this guy might have some hills and valleys and barely touch before going on its merry way. So you see, the one we actually care about, the one we want to find the limit of, is actually this one right here. And what we've basically had to draw on the board here is that if we find a function above, where the entire function is above the function of interest, called h, then if we can also find a function that exists entirely below the function, and I forgot to put this, we'll call this function f. So if this function always exists above g, and if this function always exists below g, and if they basically all have to touch at this common point that I actually care about, and it was a little sloppy in the way I drew it, the point I care about is this one right here. They barely touch right there. Then basically you have squeezed it in place. So if you know what the limit of the top function is at this point, and you know what the limit of the bottom function is at this point, which is L, then you've basically proven that the limit of the function you care about is also L. So it's kind of called the squeezing theorem because they kind of intersected at one little point there. So if you wanted to write it in words, you would call this the squeezing, or the squeeze theorem. And a picture makes it very simple to understand, but in words it would say, assume that f of x is less than or equal to g of x, which is less than or equal to h of x. Now, before I go any further, what this means is that the function g is greater than f of x, and the function g is less than h of x, which is the way I've drawn it. The function g is less than h and greater than f. Less than h, greater than f, exactly as I've drawn it, for all x. So in order for this theorem to work, you have to be able to find a function that exists on the top and on the bottom of the function that we care about. Let's see, for all x in some interval. All right? Then the following is true. If the limit as x approaches a of the function f of x is equal to L, and the limit as x approaches a of h of x is also L, the conclusion will go in blue. If these two things are true, then the following is true. Then the conclusion, the punchline, the limit as x approaches a of the function we care about, g of x, is also equal to L. Now, this is one of those things that if you never saw a picture, or if you never had anybody explain it to you, if you read the squeezing theorem and you don't know what you're really reading, or you don't have a lot of mathematical background, you read it and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But now that you understand what the picture is, very simple. All it's basically saying is I have a function g, I want to find the limit. But the g function is very difficult to find the limit. Who knows why? Maybe it's the way it's written down, maybe it's very complicated, maybe it's just something that you get a weird answer, 0 over 0 or something, and you don't know how to simplify it, for instance, and you don't want to make a table for whatever reason. All it's saying is that if I can find a function f that's always less than g, and then I can also find a function h that's also less than g for some value there, and if the limit of the bottom function as we approach a is L. And the limit of the top function as we approach a is also the same number L. Because these are both equal to L, what it's basically saying is the bottom and the top function as I approach a, they have to have the same limit. That's why these functions have to come together. And because this function is always between the two functions, if they come together at a point, the limit L, then it basically means and implies that the limit of the function that I care about, g of x, as x approaches a, also must be equal to L. And that's basically the punchline. That's why it's called the squeezing theorem. Why do you use the squeezing theorem? You're probably not going to use it very much in your actual problems, but the bottom line is it's a useful theorem to prove that other limits exist and to find what other limits are. Okay? It's not something you're going to be asked probably too much. You might have a question or two, but it's an interesting thing and it's very useful to prove other things. So we'll do one quick problem here. It's difficult to apply this to all problems, but what if you want to find the limit as x approaches 0 of the function x times the sine of 1 over x? What if you wanted to find that? Okay, now we can of course always make a table of values. I mean, nobody is saying that you can't calculate it with a calculator. But let's pretend that it's 1850 and I don't have a calculator, which is when calculus was invented a long, long time ago. So how would you actually figure out what this limit was without the use of a computer or a calculator just to plug in an infinite number of values? Well, one way we can do is using the squeezing theorem. But before we use the squeeze theorem, let's just try to plug this thing in and see what happens. Well, if x goes to 0 and then we have the sine of 1 over 0 inside, this becomes problematic. Because 1 over 0 is like an infinite number, and then if I try to take the sine of that, then what is that value? It's difficult to calculate that. So it's not a great direction to go if you want to go that direction. It doesn't give you a nice warm feeling when you start getting infinities inside of your calculation somewhere. So we can learn a lot in this particular case by plotting the function, and we'll try to find two functions that exist on the top and the bottom of the function we care about. So this is x. And this is f of x. And when I say f of x, it's the entire function, x times the sine of 1 over x. Okay? What does this look like? First of all, look at it in two parts. We have a function, sine of something, and then we have x out in front. What does the sine function look like? Okay, sure, sometimes you may have a high frequency sine, sometimes you may have a very low frequency sine, but the sine function always looks like a sine wave, and it always goes between 0 and 1. It bounces between 0 and 1 constantly, right? It just kind of goes up and down and up and down. So this part of the function, this one right here, this bounces between +1 and -1 in a cyclical fashion, okay? But we're taking this and we're multiplying by x. So as x gets bigger, 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 you're basically multiplying by either 1 or -1 or some value in between. So as x gets bigger, it's still going to look like a wave, but it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as we go on, because as we get farther along in x, the base function's bouncing between +or -1, but I'm multiplying by a bigger and bigger and bigger number. And you can extend the whole concept the other direction too. I'm probably going to screw this drawing up, so forgive me, but I'll try to make it symmetrical. Whatever it is, whatever it really looks like, it should look symmetrical. Something like that. That's not perfect, but it looks something like this. And this is the function x times the sine of 1 over x. And what can we learn from this? Because ultimately we have a function here, it's difficult to find the limit. But in order to apply the squeezing theorem, we have to find a function that bounds it on the top and a function that bounds it from the bottom. And then they have to kind of intersect at this common point where x is equal to 0, so we can find the limit of those top and bottom functions, and we know what the limit of the middle one is, okay? So we know that the sine of 1 over x must exist between -1 and 1. Okay, the frequency we haven't even talked about, but we know it cannot go any bigger than that. And because it's multiplied by x, we also know, just by kind of thinking about it, something you might not realize at first, but basically we know that x times the sine of 1 over x must exist between absolute value of x and absolute value or negative absolute value of x. This is the part, the second line here is the part that you're not so sure about. I think I can convince everybody that the sine of anything must be between -1 and 1. But it's a little bit harder to prove to you that when you then stick an x out here, it's got to get bigger and bigger and bigger, kind of in a straight line fashion, or at least the boundary of this function, the envelope, is between negative absolute value of x and positive absolute value of x. If you think back to what the absolute value function looks like, it starts here and it goes off in a line this way, because for all positive values of x, the absolute value is positive. And it's basically the same number, it's just positive. And for all negative negative values of x, it also goes in the negative direction like this. So in other words, if I start sticking negative values in here, when I take the absolute value, I just get the positive version of it. So it's a line that goes off in this direction. So this kind of weird triangular looking function, this is the absolute value function. And it turns out that it's the upper bound of this envelope here. So the actual function we care about zigzags here and gets bigger and smaller as we approach the origin, but the envelope is really the absolute value function, and that's something that just comes about because when you multiply x times a sine function, it's going to oscillate between this is oscillating between plus or minus 1. This is basically changing the envelope and making the envelope bigger and bigger and bigger as you go. I'm not going to prove this is true, but you can kind of see from the drawing that it is true. So that's the upper function. And the bottom function, it should come as no surprise that it's also very similar in shape. Okay, so what we're basically saying, the function that we care about is bounded from, on the top, the larger function is just absolute value of x, the blue function. Okay, and from the bottom side, this is the exact same function, absolute value of x, but it's mirror image, so it's negative absolute value of x. If you don't know if you would have ever really figured that part out yourself, don't worry about it. This is just more of an illustration of how the squeezing theorem works. I haven't proven it to you, but I've kind of used some analogies with the way this is written out here. But I guess the way to really do it is if you plotted a table of values of this function, you would find that it's the envelope is bounded by absolute value of x on the top and negative absolute value of x on the bottom. All right, so now that we have that established, and I didn't really prove this, but you believe it to be true because I'm telling you then, we have a function that sits on top of the function we care about for all values, and we have a function that sits underneath for all values. So if we take the limit as x goes to 0 of the lower function, which is negative absolute value of x, we just plug it in and you get negative 0, and absolute value of 0, 0. So basically there is no such thing as negative 0. You have a 0 here, the negative you can just kind of drop it. You say that the answer is 0. And we take the limit of the other function, the limit as x goes to 0 of the upper bounded function, absolute value of x. We plug it in there, you get absolute value of 0, which is also 0. So what we have basically figured out is that we want to find the limit of the function that we have been given on the board, which is the limit as x goes to 0 of x times the sine of x. We want to find the limit of this guy. We didn't really know how to do that. So what we did is we drew a graph and we figured out that this function is bounded on the top by this absolute value function right here. And we found that it's bounded on the bottom by the same function, or by a mirror image function, negative absolute value of x. And then we took the limit of both of these functions and figured out that when x approaches 0 for both of the bounding functions, we get the same exact limit. This is exactly what we said before. If the limit of the top function, or this is a top function, if the limit of the top function and the limit of the bottom function at the same point A is the exact same limit L, which is what we got here, we're going to the same place and we get exactly the same function, then the function that sits between them as you approach the same number must also be the same. So it's just a way to prove that the limit of this guy is 0 without actually having to figure that out. Now, this was kind of a specially chosen problem. We were able to construct the upper and lower boundary functions pretty easily. I mean, it may not be something every student would figure out on their own, but it's something that when I show you, I think you can kind of wrap your brain around and say, okay, yeah, I get that. So the squeezing theorem is more of a theoretical thing. It's not something you're going to pull out of your bag every single time you work a limit problem, because the trick here really is to figure out the top and the bottom functions, really, that's the problem. But it's a theoretical thing. So it's theoretically saying if you have an upper bounding function and a lower bounding function, and if you take the limit of both of those functions and they both approach the same limit at the same point, then the function that sits between them must also have the same limit. And that's how we can draw this conclusion. So I hope you understand the squeezing theorem, at least theoretically. It'll help you on a test if you have to apply it. And then sometimes reading these calculus limit theorems can be difficult, so hopefully you understand it here. Make sure you can work this guide and that you understand it. Follow me on to the next section where we'll continue working with some additional limits and theorems that we have in limit theory in calculus.
Learn anything at mathandscience.com.